everyone! I am here, Cosmere Junkie, aka Gary, with my beautiful and talented, lovely wife, Emily. Now, Emily is reading through the Stormlight Archive. She attempted this a few years back when we first got married, 3 or 4 years back, and she got through part of Oathbringer, fell off of it, decided that she didn't want to try reading them again until the fifth book, Wind and Truth, came out, which is coming out in December. So, hence, we are now in the middle of a reread. Emily just finished The Way of Kings. It's her second time. It's been a long time, and we are going to talk about it. And then we're going to do talks about each book as we go through. So please join us on this journey. Subscribe if you want to see her lovely face. More often, comment and let me know. So go ahead, Emily. What were your thoughts on The Way of Kings?
I liked it.
We have some questions from the people over on Instagram. You guys sent in a bunch of questions, so we'll get into those. But if you have any overarching thoughts you want to give, first impressions, how it compared to your first read through, and then we'll go through the questions and go from there.
I think compared to my first read through, this was a lot quicker. I was able to take breaks the first time through, and so it wasn't so much information all at once.
She has to read 18 chapters a week.
Yes.
If she's going to be done by December 6th.
With all 4 books.
We are going to Dragon Steel Nexus, so if you're going, we'll see you there.
But I liked it. There were things that I didn't remember and things that I did remember, and things I knew something was gonna happen. I couldn't remember what happened, and so then I still had that fresh oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? I could feel the anticipation building up to some pivotal moments.
Yeah, great. We'll jump into some questions. Mikkel _SV_ said, rate it 1 out of 10.
I think I'd say 8 or 9.
8 or 9. Okay, why?
I read a lot of thick books, so that's not the problem, but I think with Brandon Sanderson, there's so much information in his books and so much world building, but he does it in a good way. But that reading, over 1,000-page book I think I read it in 3 or 4 weeks. It's a lot. It's a lot to do. And so that was probably why it just felt like a lot. It was heavy. It was just a heavy intake of words.
No, you're right. A lot of people find it, I've recommended it to some friends, and they even said, it's a lot. There's a lot of world building. Now, I started with The Way of Kings, and it was perfect for me, and I was hooked immediately. Then I sought out the rest of the Cosmere. But for a lot of people, it's not the right place to start, just because Brandon himself has said he asks us to trust him a little bit, because he is doing a setup for a massive series, 10-book series, and this book really does have a lot of work to do, and some of that work can feel a little bit grueling, I think, but I think it gets better as you go into more books. But I still think, for me, the payoff of that Sander Latch at the end, it just makes it one of my favorite books, even with all the world building.
Yeah, makes sense.
Great. So we have a couple of questions that are similar, so I'm gonna combine some of these. But what's your favorite character / favorite character from the first time you read versus if it changed with the second time you read? Yeah.
My favorite character is Syl, and I think the reason I really like Syl is because she's the only character at this point in the series that doesn't have pessimistic moments, I guess. She's just this little light, and she's so happy and full of joy and curiosity, and she's kind of got an innocence about her. And it's a very stark contrast to Kaladin and his depression and what he deals with, and I love that about her and how she is able to kind of counteract him a little bit. All the other characters, at least the main characters, are all have gone through really difficult things, and they have heavy backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I think.
Yeah, I think Syl can be compared largely to a child, because she is learning everything about what's going on around her, and she has this innocence that just you can't help but be drawn to a little bit. And then she's on top of it, she's got a sense of humor that's really sweet, and she likes to crack jokes and tries to make Kaladin smile. And when someone's trying to help other people, can't help but like them. So yeah, I definitely think Syl is a one of a kind. We talked about this earlier. And you had mentioned that Like you don't think there's any other character like Syl, and I'd mentioned that I think the closest you get to Syl, where it's just pure blind optimism, is probably the Logan. Those two characters are the happiest characters. And that's not to say that later in the books, though, as you get further, Syl does grow as a character. Her thoughts and her perspectives expand, and so it is not always all just lightheartedness, and I love that about her. If she were to stay kind of two-dimensional, I think I wouldn't enjoy her as much. But the fact that she is growing and has her own character arc makes it more appealing.
Yeah, you see that in the first book too. She's like, I'm remembering things.
Yeah.
Like, and she goes off for a while and we come back and she has more information to share with Kaladin, and like, and so you do see even that small amount of character growth even in the first book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like she's asking about death and all these other questions that like humans have to deal with. So very cool. Okay, so related question, because that was your favorite character, but who is your favorite POV? Favorite perspective to read?
Man, it's not Shallan.
Not Shallan.
It's not Shallan. I love Dalinar and Kaladin both. I think maybe Kaladin, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Maybe because, well, I guess I'm not the same age as him, but we're kind of in the same.
You're close enough.
We're close enough that I feel like I relate to him a little bit more. Maybe Dalinar is my dad's age. It doesn't negate the fact that I think his POV is. I think it's just easier to identify with Kaladin. Also, I just think that
If we're just going off demographics, Shallan would be your number one. But
I mean, and we both are really, really interested in a lot of the same things, her and I. And so, but I don't enjoy.
I know the question was about like who's your favorite POV, and you said Kaladin because you relate to him. But I like to pull on that thread a little bit more with Shallan. Like, why do you not enjoy reading her?
Maybe they're a little more boring.
Yeah, a
And
lot
I
more
think
philosophy.
she's a little annoying. I don't mind philosophy though. Like I like learning like history, and she kind of delves into history a little bit as she works with Yasna and the philosophy of things. And I liked reading about Kharbran through her eyes, I guess. But
There's a lot of world building
yeah,
done under her perspective. Yeah,
that's true.
and that could be a lot. But you said you like seeing Carbron through her eyes. But then you said annoying. Like, does her sarcasm just kind of come off?
Maybe a little bit. It feels a little forced. Sometimes I've laughed out loud at things she said and done, and just like because there is comedic. She does have comedic timing too sometimes. But I think Yasna had made a really good point in talking to her and saying like wit is good, but you need to use it appropriately. Like that's like paraphrasing basically, but she did say that to Shallan. Like learn how to use it to your advantage rather than just spewing it.
Yeah. Something about like a tool that is used by a skilled hand that knows how to use it effectively is much more effective than a hose that you just blast and it never turns off, right?
Yeah.
And that's how Shallan was for sure. So I get that. That's interesting because that goes right into this question here. Thoughts on Shallan's storyline this far? It's a little bit different than what you've already talked about how you feel about her, but what are your thoughts on the story that's happening there?
My heart hurts for her because she's kind of stuck between like a rock and a hard place between wanting to be loyal to her family and wanting to pursue her own endeavors through her education with Yasna. And you see that a little bit when she's going back and forth about whether or not to steal the Soulcaster. And ultimately, Yasna killing the men in that alleyway is what tilts her towards finally stealing the Soulcaster to take to her family.
Yeah.
So I guess like it's fine. It's not my favorite, of course, but I can see why it's important. I know why it's important, and I think it helps that I've read book 2 and parts of book 3. But I don't know. I think that I have a hard time with her POV, maybe because we're a little similar. We both don't really have a filter. We both are kind of bookish, and I don't know. Like I feel like I can relate to her well on that kind of level, but maybe that's why I find her annoying. Like, oh my gosh, I have a perfect quote from the book in it. Hold on. in chapter 8, I don't know whose chapter this is in the book. Actually, it's a Shallan chapter. Yasna says, sometimes we find it hardest to accept in others that which we cling to in ourselves. And so, like,
There's a deep why.
it's deep, but I also totally can see, like, I can just apply that to me watching Shallan. Like, I relate to her a little bit, but also, like, probably I don't like her.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think for me personally, as I read this from my archive and I've done rereads, I like her more. Her chapters, I'll be honest, I first read the book when I was 16 or 17, and I skipped the Shallan chapters to get to Kaladin chapters and to get to Zeth chapters and Dalinar chapters, and then I'd read that a little bit, and then I'd go back and I'd have double the Shallan chapters to get to catch everything up.
She doesn't have nearly as many chapters as Dalinar and Kaladin.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've never counted them, but
sorry, I think I only noticed though that at the end, because then like everything happens with the final bridge run, and then like, oh, here's the last Shallan chapter. Like,
yes,
there's a huge gap between when she was poisoned and then when.
Yeah, that might be because the standard language, the big culmination of everything was going on, and the big culmination for Shallan is specifically her final reveal of who Parshendi are, that they're the Void Prisoners, right? So, yeah, I get that she didn't have a lot in that end, but anyways, for me, as I've gone through and done these rereads, I love her more each time I go through a reread, because I have a lot of empathy for her. Her character.
Hard not to.
Yeah.
Especially in book 2 and the beginning of book 3.
Yeah, when you see how well Sanderson wrote her as a character of someone who's gone through such insane trauma. Like, we talk about Kaladin having crazy trauma, but Kaladin had a family who loved him and who cared for him. And Shallan, like her dad loved her, very loose term, but like her family was so broken, and she had no one from such a small age, and that trauma she's had to lock and put on essentially a mask to protect herself so that she doesn't have to face all that she went through. And my heart goes out to her so much more, that I understand her so much better. But that comes with the knowledge of where she comes from previous books. But yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed her. Still Kaladin's my favorite chapters.
I do love Dalinar.
Yeah, and Dalinar's a great character. Let's see. Will asks, was it amazing?
It was very good. I think that Sanderson does a really good job of drawing it.
Okay. Another one, this is not a question. It says no question, but just Dalinar's butt. So that's not the Way of Kings quote. That's
not
down the line. But Samita04 says, what did you catch the second time reading it that you missed the first time?
Probably the biggest one is Kaladin drawing in Stormlight.
Mm-hmm.
I was flipping through my notes before we started recording, and I noticed that I had highlighted a bunch of times where Kaladin is like, takes a deep breath and feels stronger. Like, one of them, he's like, where did all this strength come from? He felt like he run for hours or something like that. And then, trying to think.
Sanderson's foreshadowing is nuts.
Yeah, and I think with Shallan and Yasna and Capsule, the poisoning of the bread and the jam, that I noticed more, because every time he would see them, he brought bread and jam. Every time. And then,
I mean, that's kind of the big stuff. Anything else you pick up, foreshadowing could be potentially for like other series, like with the epilogues. Not the epilogues, but the phrases right before the chapter starts, the epigraphs. Some of those relate to off-world things from other series.
Wait, what?
Have
you talked about this before?
Yeah, we have. We've talked about how some epigraphs are from Harmony or Sazed.
Oh, yes,
we've talked about,
have. How some in Way of Kings are letters between Sazed and Wit.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we did.
So there are things like that. There's other hints and clues to other series, but as far as like foreshadowing for this immediate story, that is the big one. Is Stormlight.
Yeah, and I think if you know if you know where he's gonna end up, it's way easy to pick him up.
Mhm.
Way easy.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, for sure. Like there's also foreshadowing, like for reveals that come later in the series, like the singers, and
Dalinar's wife.
the secret about the Parshadni that we find out in like book 3. So Dalinar's wife. Yeah. So there's foreshadowing all over the place. But as far as for foreshadowing that gets a payoff in this book, I think Kaladin is
That's
the
the biggest one.
yeah. Let's see. Magus says, "Will you be required to read Edge Dancer and Dawn Shard as well?"
Yes, I will be reading those. In fact, after I think we're reading them in chronological order, so I think Edge Dancer's after we.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So
18 chapters a day.
18 chapters.
And you are not behind at all right now.
Oh, I should be like halfway through the first, or like 12 chapters into book 2 or something like that. I haven't even started book 2 yet, but it's okay. The person I'm doing my buddy read with isn't on track either, so I'm in good company.
Call them out. Yes. No,
Sorry.
You're good. If she's watching.
If she watches.
Also from Magus. This being your second time through, were there tidbits you picked up on? That's the same as Samita, so we'll go over that one. Kind of the same question. Overall opinion so far, we kind of touched on that. Thoughts on Shallan? We've talked about that.
Okay, but I have to talk about though, like Shallan, you mentioned it earlier. Shallan really did go through so much as like a child and even like as a teenager still. But and so like I feel like I've railed on her a lot, but I really do have empathy for her, especially in later books as you learn where she's come from. And I mean, even in this book, you have the interlude of her brother, like killing things, and so you're kind of like, but
they have a messed up family. Like
yeah,
there's things down the road that there could be a reason.
yeah,
They're so messed up.
I definitely have empathy for her, and I think that her coping mechanism later on in the series is good. Like, makes sense with what she's had to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with all of that. Moash is the worst, though that's spoilery. That's not really a question, but I mean, like to this point in the series, thoughts on Moash?
I think it's hard because I already know some of what he does in later books.
Remind the audience, you have read through part of Oathbringer, so she does know the crazy thing he does in Oathbringer.
Is it in Oathbringer? I thought it was in Words of Radiance.
It's in Oathbringer.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's stuff 100% is in Oathbringer.
Oh, okay. But I do think I liked his growth from hating Kaladin and thinking he was just stuck up and kind of full of himself to being his friend and one of his like closest like companions in battle. Like he relies on Moash a lot during the final plateau run. And um and so I love that about him, but you do see a lot of his more selfish nature.
Oh, for sure.
As he talks about just wanting revenge. All he wants is revenge. He doesn't say from who, by who, or from who. He doesn't say who he wants revenge against, but he has hatred for Light Eyes, just similar to Kaladin. But unlike Kaladin, he doesn't care about them. He doesn't have that like care that Kaladin learned from his dad.
For who?
Just for people, I think. I think Moash is selfish, and I think that in the first book he becomes a good friend for Kaladin. I can't remember his relationship with Kaladin in book 2, or even book 3.
It's a big part of book 2 is his relationship with Kaladin. But I will say that I think Moash suffers a little bit from I want to be friends with Kaladin only when he has powers kind of friendship. Once Kaladin starts glowing, then Moash is his most loyal soldier. But
I guess I never picked that up on that.
he does. I mean, he does embrace Kaladin a little bit when he starts to learn that he can learn things from Kaladin. Kaladin teaches him the spear. He's very anxious and eager to get his hands on any kind of power, which makes sense as a bridgeman that you'd want to have whatever power and influence you can get over your miserable life. But I think he's a good foil for Kaladin, where both of them grew up poor, dark eyes, but then they developed this huge anger towards Light Eyes, and it's just to mirror each other to show like different approaches. Moash, it could essentially have been Kaladin if Kaladin made different choices.
Well, like in like psychology and stuff, you talk about how when you go through a traumatic event, like you can go one of two ways. You can be better for it or you can be worse for it. And Kaladin and Moash went separate ways. Moash became worse because of it, whereas Kaladin became better. And I mean, he still has that hatred for Light Eyes, but like I think that a huge part of him being willing to go and save Dalinar and his army is because of what he learned from his dad and that care for human life.
Yes.
Pause. Good, it's still.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's a good question now. Great. We'll skip this one because you kind of already talked about it. What do you think about the way Sanderson reveals information about it? Cool. So Austin Rollins 314 asks, what's your favorite interlude?
I don't like the interludes.
Not a fan.
I think maybe Sazed, honestly, though. Not Sazed, sorry, Zets. Because,
different book.
yes, very different book. I loved Mistborn, though.
Mm.
I think I like Zets because you kind of get a glimpse into who he is as a character in the prologue.
Sure.
When he kills Gavilar. But like you don't really get a huge grasp on him as a person. And there was even one interlude about the guy who traded him and sold him, I think.
Yeah.
And so like you see more, he has more character development. It kind of helps you have more like empathy towards him, almost like maybe sympathy. I don't know if I really maybe sympathy. And
I think he's a sympathetic character.
I think he's a sympathetic character. Your heart hurts for him. He's basically a slave to anybody, and he does whatever they ask. And it's not like they're asking him to do menial things.
Yeah.
They're asking him to take a life.
Many lives, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Zeth for the win. I love the interludes. I love how they expand the world, and as you become more Cosmere aware, obviously, they become more interesting. Well, Pure Lakes, for example, with the three strangers looking for somebody. That's a great interlude.
I will say though, I know this isn't the first book, but I also really love Lift's interludes.
Yes, from Words of Radiance.
Yeah. They're so funny.
I think she only has one, but
two.
You'll love.
She had a couple. Maybe I'm thinking of when she's not just in an interlude.
Maybe because she's also a character in Northbringer, but I think you will really like Edge Dancer then.
Is that about?
That's her book.
Oh, okay.
Yep. In fact, the first chapter in Edge Dancer is the interlude that you first meet Lift, and then it continues the story after that.
Okay.
And Lift will be one of the main characters for the second arc this season. She'll be one of the flashback characters.
Interesting.
So favorite interlude, favorite character, we've done those. The Lopin, Robbie Ray says the Lopin. You're a fan, I assume. Gotcha.
I like him. He's funny. I like that. I like that he makes himself useful. You know, like he's just kind of thrown to Bridge for, like as like a, guess you need more bridgemen. Here, have someone who only has one arm, and he makes himself useful. And I think I like that about him is he's like, I have worth, even though I don't have the worth that you're looking for, right? And I like that about him.
Yeah, a lot of people find him annoying, but I think the Lopin is legendary.
He's a little eccentric, but he's a good guy.
Gotta love the one-armed Ardazian jokes. How many Khandra did you notice?
I thought one of the interludes was about a Khandra because he talks about how he could get big, and I even texted you about it, but I don't think I noticed any, and that wasn't even a Khandra. Gary said he was my Khandra, so that was a little disappointing because I thought I was so smart.
Yeah, and I'd have to double check in the books, but I know there's a huge speculation online that servant to Taravangian, one of his servants, is a Khandra. For several reasons, some of his verbiage and phrasing is very similar to Pensoon in Mistborn, and then also he's bald, he has as little hair as possible, and Tensoon also talked about how When you're a conjurer, you have to thread every single hair through the pores, and it's very time consuming and takes a lot of work, and they usually don't like to do it, which is um, why the chondros, when they're in their pure bodies, usually don't have any hair. So
Poor Tensoon is a dog.
yes, that's why it takes so long for him to do it, and that's why he's one of the fastest.
That's actually hilarious. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's painstaking. Yeah. So
He was committed.
anyways, so the idea is that this servant is Khandra, and Sanderson has confirmed that there is a Khandra running around on Roshar. So that's the biggest one, but I do not remember if those chapters with him were in the Way of Kings or if they were in later books. So he may not have been able to pick up on that yet.
Yeah, he doesn't have much screen time in the first book. Mostly you see him through Shallan's eyes.
Yeah.
And then in one of Zeth's interludes.
Yeah, so I don't think, honestly, if you didn't notice that there was a Khandra in the entire series after reading it, I wouldn't fault you. But especially after just the first book, I think you're okay. But now that you know, you can go through and watch for it.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, I think I found it. Skylar asks, who do you think are the main villains at this point in the story?
Definitely Sadius for sure. Moash, but I don't. At this point in the story, I don't think he's a villain yet.
Okay.
I don't know, Sadius.
He's just a little grumpy with Kaladin when he tries to get him up for training.
Yeah, the Parshendi are, but the Parshendi and Sadius, I'll say maybe. And then Moash. Yeah, but I mostly know Moash is just because of later books.
So people I would probably add to the list. I know these questions for Emily, but I'm kind of answering them myself. I would say Odium is the big bad. I would say probably.
But he's not mentioned much. He's mentioned like twice, maybe even.
Yeah, at this point is what they're saying. So at the end of the book is when he's finally dropped as the big bad.
That's true.
So I'd say Odium. I would say one that we're not maybe super aware of from the Way of Kings, but going into everything is Amaram is definitely a villain.
Taravangian.
Taravangian is also probably the Taravangian and Odium are probably the two main villains, but
yeah, but then you don't even
sinister motives.
Yeah.
And Taravangian sinister. I don't know if that's the right word. He's trying his best, but he's doing a crappy job. Yes. All right, I think that wraps up these questions. Do you have any last thoughts? Or oh yeah. We'll cut that out. And then the last question here is about. Why are you doing this? Well, there's like 3 slides.
Oh wow. Okay, go ahead. Nothing I wanted to see if it was there.
Well, there's like 3 slides.
Oh wow. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So the last question here is about the final bridge run, and what are your thoughts on how that went down?
I knew it was gonna happen. I knew that Sadius was gonna leave Dalinar stranded. I couldn't remember quite how it happened, or like not quite how Dalinar got saved. I knew it was gonna happen. I knew that he was gonna be okay. I knew that Kaladin was gonna be okay, but I couldn't remember quite how Dalinar made it off the tower.
And you didn't even remember that interaction Dalinar had with Sadius, correct?
I knew he had a confrontation with Sadius.
You didn't remember
how it went.
Yeah.
No. Mm-hmm. But with the bridge run, then when Kaladin's team is talking about how they're gonna escape, now that they just had a perfect windows escape, that's when I remembered Kaladin goes back and saves them, and then Dalinar repays them by saving the bridge crew. But I couldn't remember how that went about either. So the whole exchange with Sadius. But
did you love it?
I did love it. I really loved that. I loved the small character, like it was big, but it was in such a small amount of time. Growth of Kaladin's character in that moment of when he goes from. I mean, he still doesn't trust them, the Light Eyes. He still doesn't trust the Light Eyes, and he still has hard feelings towards them, especially Sadius and his army. But how he went from not caring so much about them to being willing to go back and risk his life to save them because he knew that's what the right thing to do was.
Well, and I would even argue that Kaladin hasn't even, I don't know if he's progressed that much from his hatred of Light Eyes it was probably partially all the dark-eyed soldiers there that he really wanted to save. That he realizes that it's not just light eyes over there that are in trouble. It's there's just all this life that is going to be slaughtered, and he is, as we know, a protector as a Windrunner. It's his whole thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, but yeah, I loved that. I loved how Calvin picked up on a lot of things within the battle. He hadn't battled the Parshendi yet. All he had done was draw their arrows towards him as he's running around and basically their corpses. Like, and he, and so like when he notices that they had started to send Parshendi warriors without gemstones in their beards because they all observed him drawing in the stormlight from them. And then he's like, "Oh, they're not as subhuman as the light eyes make them out to be."
And
And so I like was like, "Yes, because I don't think that they're not human. I think they're human. I just think they're a different race." And I think then it's more racism against the Parshendi in the book. But and then I also really loved how he was able to like take charge, and he really slid right into that role of commanding people around well,
yeah, that was super
even though
satisfying for me at least because
they
you
all
go
were
through
outranked him by
like
a mile.
yeah, that was super satisfying for me at least because you go through like 909 pages I counted before the Cinderland starts. So there's 909 pages where Sanderson's just like basically grinding Kaladin into the dirt, and he's just having the worst time. And then he gets to finally like snap back and clap back at all these light eyes and snarl at them and say, "Get off, get on your horse, and you're gonna do as I say." And it made for a super satisfying moment. And Sanderson's really good at like getting these satisfying moments that you're wanting and you're hoping for, and that was definitely one of them. Um, and I agree also with what you said about the Parsh Hindi. I agree to an extent. I think that he definitely is able to view them. He views that they attack them in pairs and that they don't try to flood somebody when they're attacking them. They try to be more honorable, and that's the word Kaladin uses. Is
Yeah,
that he saw that there was honor in the way that they fought.
they don't
And
attack wounded soldiers. And
yes, yeah. So he's seeing honor in them, and he's starting to see them more as human, which is a character growth for him, right? To because he like so many other people would view parshmen and be like they're just parshmen, right? And that's like how people used to be with slaves, like they're just slaves. It doesn't matter. I will argue about whether or not they're human because I think there are two different kinds of ways that you can define human. There's human biologically, and there's human uh, in the sense of like you have human feelings, you have human emotions, you like our feelings are what make us human, is what a lot of people will say. And in that sense, yes, they're very human. Like in the same way that like if I lived in Star Wars in the galaxy far, far away and I saw other intelligent life, 100% they deserve the same like rights and fair treatment as humans. Like
Mhm.
we're not better than them, right? 100% agree with that. But at the same time, I can still look at them and be like, we're not the same species, right? The aliens and like Darth Maul is not a human. He's an alien race that fights humans, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, right? And so Darth Maul's actually perfect. He's red and black, and the Parshendi are red and black. Where I'm like, yeah, they deserve to be treated as human, but they're still aliens. Or we're the aliens. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Any other thoughts on the final bridge run or the book?
I also you talked about honor,
Mhm.
the Parshendi fight with honor, and I think that was also really illustrated when they finally were able to retreat, and Dalinar turns back and he sees the other Shardbearer raising his sword and the salute to him.
Mhm.
And I really really appreciated that, and I also felt like,
Cover of the book,
yeah, wait, really?
right up there.
Oh, I didn't know that. I also didn't know that was a Parshendi.
I assume that's it. I actually, it's the only time in the book that somebody salutes with a sword, so that I remember.
What, Dalinar? No, because his cape is red.
I'll put on the
Oh
picture
well,
above
whatever.
that so that you guys have something nice to look at.
But I loved that, and I think it also like a couple weeks ago we talked about war and honorable, like gentlemanly warfare,
Mhm.
and how and I think that fits the picture of what gentlemanly warfare is, as much as it can be, because it's still war, but like showing honor for the people on the other side and some sort of like mercy and recognition of their life.
Mm.
And I think that's shown in the part she didn't spare the extremely wounded soldiers. Um, but then also like when there the whole Sanderlanche, I really did like. I really liked the part where Navani is talking to Sadius, and Sadius has his head up his ass,
Mhm.
and is so full of himself, and Yasna just like not Yasna, Navani can barely even like
Mhm.
process what she's hearing. She the man that she loves is presumed dead, but she cannot grasp that. And
Mhm.
I loved reading the part where she's writing the prayer on it, on the plateau, and then later you see Sadius standing on that prayer. The prayer was justice,
Mhm.
and you see
And
Sadius
Sadius tread on
standing,
justice, yes.
and then and so I loved that part. I loved seeing Dalinar coming over, reading about Dalinar coming over the plateaus, and you see him coming home, and
Mhm.
like the relief that they felt, and of course Sadius was pissed beyond all belief, but um yeah, and I think too like Kaladin, they're coming back, and all he knows is that he every time he's trusted Elidice, he's been betrayed or something bad has happened, and so lives have been lost, and so he's like, well, I really can't run away.
Mhm.
They'll kill me if I run. But if I go back, Sadius is going to kill me. And how do I really know that Dalinar is going to save me
Mhm.
and my bridgeman? And so like he's really like stewing in that. And then you see Dalinar on the flip side is like now the matter of the bridgeman, and he is like remembering it. He knows that he has to do this and take care of them because he promised. And I think that's what sets him apart from the other Light Eyes High Princes. Because and he even talks about it throughout the whole book. Like it's even alluded to all the time about how he's moved on them and how Sadius' war camp is a disaster. And um anyway, so I really like that.
Yeah, it's such a great moment when he gives up the sword. And you mentioned earlier when you read it to me that uh, that the part where he exchanged priceless sword
Oh.
for 2,600 priceless lives.
Yeah.
That's a great spot.
So Kaladin is thinking he promised he would free us from Sadius, and yet where had the promises of Light Eyes got him in the past? And then a couple paragraphs down, he says, and another promise dies, Kaladin thought, turning away. In the end, for all his good intentions, this Dalinar Kholin was the same as all the others. And then 2 pages later, after Dalinar has traded the sword, and Kaladin is in disbelief, he doesn't understand why Dalinar has done this. He asks Dalinar about it, and Dalinar says, what is a man's life worth? Dalinar asked softly. The slave masters say one is worth about 2 emerald broams, Kaladin said, frowning. And what do you say? The life is priceless, he said, immediately quoting his father. Dalinar smiled, wrinkle lines extending from the corners of his eyes. Coincidentally, that is the exact value of a shard blade. I teared up reading this the first time, too. So today, you and your men sacrificed to buy me 2,600 priceless lives, and all I had to repay you with was a single priceless sword. I call that a bargain. And I love that because they both recognize how important human lives are, and Dalinar was willing to give up this truly a priceless artifact, one that he had fought for, and to save men he didn't even know, and that were considered less than and not worthy of living. Like Amaram said, he was giving Kaladin mercy by letting him live, when I truly think that the mercy would have been to kill him at that point in the book, because he'd been through so much. But I just loved that.
That's a hot take, but yes,
It is a hot
mercy
take.
to put someone out of their misery.
Well,
But-
but then even later he says, Kaladin thinks to himself, 27 men lived. He'd finally managed to save someone, for now that was enough. And I loved that because that's all he wanted, was to save people and to take care of people, and that's what he had learned from his dad, and he'd been unable to do that. And he has this whole inner turmoil of like, is it really am I saving people by taking lives? And
Well, yeah, and for me, that is the pinnacle of the book that gets me every time. Not this part, but on the same lines about Kaladin's arc, where Kaladin has just like lost people time after time after time. All his slave rebellions, they kill everyone but him. His brother, just everyone, and then it merges the flashbacks of we get to the point where he sees his brother die and he holds his brother on the ground in the middle of the fighting, and he's just sobbing in this flashback, and it cuts to the present where suddenly he sees that it's all going to happen again, and Bridge 4 is going to die. All the men are being slaughtered by the Parshendi in Dalinar's camp, and so he then has to come through and be that protector and go and protect those who cannot protect themselves. It was just such a beautiful, beautiful moment for his character that like that gets me. Do you have anything else that you wanted to
It was a good moment.
say or add?
No,
Well,
I
great.
think it's
Well,
good. I'm
this
excited
has
to
been
read
this
the
has been
second
fun.
book.
Right. All right. Well, we will see you guys back when we get to let's get through Words of Radiance.